Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. You know that we focus on the pickleball mind in this podcast. My name is Tony Roig. I am the host of your podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you this week. I think you're really going to like this week's topic. We're going to talk about latent versus active errors, and it's an interesting way of framing the thought process around how you go about fixing parts of your game that you want to fix, errors in this case, and how you think about it. And it comes from another content creator's idea. You know, I'm not just a content creator myself. I also consume content. And so in that process, I come across these ideas sometimes like this one that I think, you know, really can help us understand, we can apply it to pickleball and help us through our processes. Before we dive into the podcast, we are currently, we have a pre-order page for the Pickleball Therapy book that is ready to roll. The reviews so far have been awesome, which is cool, but I guess maybe not surprising because it is a good book. I think I wrote it, so I guess I'm biased still, but it is good and it has a lot of really good information. And if you enjoy this podcast, you'll enjoy the book. The book's actually called Pickleball Therapy, the book. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. All right, let's dive. Oh, and I do have a riff today. I have a riff today about protecting your journey, which I think you'll enjoy. And as I think you know by now, riffs are based on just things that have happened that I've come across that are interesting and that I think can help us also continue to build our resilience in a world full of inputs that sometimes are helpful and sometimes not. Well, one input that was helpful was this idea that I came across about latent versus active error. So I'm going to set it up for you, and then I'm going to talk about how it applies to your pickleball, specifically in all three pillars of pickleball: mechanical, strategic, athletic. We'll work on an example in each. And let me set it up to start, and then I'll read the definitions of latent and active errors. So this is from a content creator who I enjoy watching his ideas about how we live as a society. That's an area of life that is of interest to me. How we interact with each other and how we can maybe improve improve how we do that. And so his focus is on urban ideas, not just urban, but also city ideas. Like how do we live together? Things like, pedestrian walkways, favoring cars over pedestrians, things like that. So in this particular episode, he was talking about an accident that had occurred in his city where he lives, where a biker, a young man on a bike had been hit by a car. And, he talked about how the normal reaction to that in news coverage would be to either talk about the bike rider. So, the biker wasn't paying attention or was, swerved into the road or something like that. The driver of the car, perhaps, where the driver of the car was texting or, didn't give enough space to the biker, something like that, right? So where do we assign the blame for what happened? And the assignation of the blame is usually to the last event that occurred before the incident, which is termed the active error. But really, when you look at these types of situations, oftentimes you'll find what's called a latent error, which is really the thing that should be fixed. And in the case of traffic accidents, he was actually, while he was filming, there was a fire truck pulled up behind him because there was another biker that had got hit, while he's filming the episode on the previous bike accident. And then he shows a bunch of debris from prior car accidents that are in that area. So it's clear that intersection has some problem. What the problem, he didn't dive into the problem because that wasn't the point of the episode, but it was just to identify that oftentimes when you see a problem, like in this case, a car hitting a bike, there may be some latent errors that underlie that are really more at the root of the problem. And if you want to solve it, you look at the latent error. So let me give you the definitions, and then we'll dive into how this applies to pickleball. So these are just from the old Google searches. So active errors: immediate direct failures that occur at the point of care and can potentially lead to adverse events. Latent errors: underlying weaknesses or flaws in the system that remain undetected until they interact with active errors, creating conditions for accidents. So in the back to the bike incident, right? certainly was some sort of an active error. Maybe it could be something as simple as the driver didn't see the biker in that zone and hit the biker. It could be the biker swerving in front of the car. It could be, a myriad of different active errors. But there's, in this case, likely an underlying latent error that contributes to the fact that the active error results in an accident. If you think about it a different way, you can think of going back to continuing in the bike example. If you had a dedicated bike lane that was, say, 5 feet off of the road, then what are the chances that a car is going to hit a bike in that section of the road? Probably almost none. So you could have all the quote unquote active errors in the world happening. You could have a biker that's just swerving all over the place. You could even have a semi-drunk driver driving down the road, a driver who's texting, a driver who's swerving. You give that 5 foot buffer, right? That becomes like a margin for error that then reduces the chances that any active errors are going to lead to an ultimate accident. So applying that to pickleball, let's apply it in the 3 pillars. Let's start with the mechanical. So let's say that you're having difficulty with your block volley. Okay. And so the active error that you think happens when you get banged is that you're not seeing the ball, or you're not, you just missed the shot, things like that. But let's also assume that in your game, you have a problem with your foundation, and foundation is foot to court. So that's how your body connects to how your body is set while you're hitting the ball, which is absolutely critical to your shots. And it particularly shows up in things like a block volley. Errors in your foundation will show up in a block volley because you're moving your body, your paddle ends up moving, you end up missing the shot. In that situation, you have a latent error. The latent error is your foundation. And if you want to fix your volleys, you're going to want to fix your foundation. If you don't fix your foundation, that latent error, then the chances of having active errors in your volleys is going to be way higher than if you fix the latent error. And let me just work this out a little more to be clear with you. You're not going to eliminate all active errors. You'll still make errors in your shot. So the active part of, hitting the ball with your paddle at the time that you have to during a block of a bang, you'll still have errors in there, but your errors will be less. Your active errors will be less because you have addressed the latent error. If you don't address a latent error, such as a foundational problem, then you're likely to have more active errors as you play. So that's how you start thinking about, can I identify the possibility of a latent error in my shots if I'm having consistently having errors with my shots. And I'll give you a personal example. For me is I know that I have I sometimes rush out of my defensive shots. So when I'm trying to reset, oftentimes I find myself coming out of it too soon, like trying to move to the next position too soon. And so that ends up with an error. I end up with an error in my reset. But I know it, right? I know that about myself. And so when it happens, it's fairly, at least easy to identify and then work towards correcting that the next couple of times that I do it by really forcing myself to stay put, if you will, while I'm hitting the shot. That's an example of understanding that I have a latent condition or a latent situation in my shot, which is that foundational issue about moving too soon, that then results in an upward tick in my active errors on those resets. So that's how those two work together on the mechanical. So if you're having mechanical problems in your game, spend some time with it and see whether there's a latent error in your mechanics that might be causing the active errors to be more than they should be. And if you're a pickleball system student, then you know that we talk about energy and trajectory and doing error diagnostics. This is an area that will shine for you if you're going to look for latent errors, because you're able to work through your different pieces of your shot. You're also able to work through the parts about footwork, foundation, and stroke mechanics to say, okay, where's this problem that might be underlying a lot of my shots? Because if you fix that latent error, you're going to make a big improvement in your mechanics. Let's switch now to the strategic pillar. So that's, the strategy of what shot to hit when, how to be on the court and things like that. If you're getting attacked early in rallies, so you're getting peppered early on the return side, and you're getting banged a lot and you're just under a lot of duress, likely cause, short return to serve. So what'll happen in that situation, the active error might be you missed a volley. right? Going back to the volley again here, but let's say you missed a volley, but you didn't miss a volley mechanically. Your mechanics are pretty good and everything else like that. You missed a volley because of the pressure that you allowed to be put on you and your team because of the short return of serve. So the latent error there is the short return of serve. And I cannot tell you how many rallies I watch where I can trace the latent error, the root cause of the problem to the short return of serve that then led to the X or the Y or the Z, led to the active error, the pop-up, the missed shot, the ultimate loss of the rally by something else. But the latent error is the short return of serve. And if you don't identify the latent error in that situation, you just end up, you're like chasing pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're chasing fantasies, right? You're trying to fix problems that aren't really there because the error, even though there is an active error, meaning like you missed a volley or you popped it up or whatever, the active error is not what you need to fix. What you need to fix there is the latent error. So that's a strategic example. And then let me give you a quick athletic example, athletic pillar example. So the example I would use there is a clouded mind. So you miss a volley. Let's stick with the volley, right? You miss the volley. So missing the volley is the active error, but you missed the volley because your mind is clouded because you were like you're just obsessing about a out call that you think was wrong. They called out the score wrong, so you're thinking about that. Whatever it is, whatever's taking up your bandwidth in your mind is going to is interfering with your ability to process the ball traveling to you in this moment. And the result then is a missed volley. The active error, missing the volley. The latent error is a cloudy mind. And if you have a clouded mind, if you have a clouded mind, you're not going to play your best. And if you're just trying to like, oh, I need to solve my volleys, that's not the problem, right? You're not addressing the right problem, which in this case would be a clouded mind. So those are examples of how understanding that there are such things as latent errors, and that those latent errors underlie or underscore your play, right? Underscore is not the right term. They sit there as you play. Basically, they exist as you play. I'll come up with the under in a second, the under word. But they're present while you're playing. These latent errors that they exist. So a clouded mind, short return of serve, foundational problem. If those exist in your game and you're missing volleys, and all you're chasing is, well, I need to get better at actually holding my paddle a certain way, my ready position, or other things like that, you're not going to be going to the source of the problem, which is a latent error that is happening in your play. And reading the definition of latent again, it is a underlying weakness or flaw in the system. In this case, you, right? You're one of your pillars that remain undetected until they interact with active errors, creating conditions for accidents, right? So in our parlance, that is a undetected weakness, right? Undetected situation going on that doesn't appear to, be a thing until you have the active error, right? So until you miss the volley, your clouded mind isn't going to be a problem, in quotes, right? Excuse me. Until you miss a volley, your foundational issues aren't going to be a quote unquote problem. Until you miss a volley, the short return of serve doesn't seem like a big deal. But then when you miss the volley, then you're like, oh, there's an underlying problem here that I need to address if I do want to, in fact, improve my chances for success and improve my play. So give that some thought in your three different pillars: mechanical, strategic, and athletic. And it's a really powerful way to process your game so that you can tease out these types of latent errors, which newsflash are going to be present. Newsflash for you and everybody else, they're going to be present in everybody's game. You're going to have some latent errors, and if you can identify what those are, you'll make really big improvements in your play. And as always, if you're being coached by us, our processes allow you to suss out those latent errors because of our focus on the big picture of pickleball. So as you work through these big picture concepts, you will suss out these latent errors will be revealed to you through your work, and then you'll solve them and you'll play better. All right, let me dive into the riff. Before I dive into the riff, I wanted to let you know that we do have a we have an affiliate code or affiliate link, I should say, with Pickleball Central. There are our equipment partners. And if you're going to buy equipment, paddles, balls, anything that you need for pickleball, we recommend you check Pickleball Central. They have the best customer service. They have a paddle 30-day trial period. I mean, it's a really, really good company to work with. They've been, they are the largest retailer in our space, and they've been forever since I've been around, and it's for a reason. Plus, if you use our link, it lets them know that you came from us, and it helps us continue to provide this kind of programming to you. You can go straight to betterpickleball.com. If you click on resources, there's a link to Pickleball Central. If you use that link, then you get any applicable discount. There are some products that have discounts. As an example, the paddle that we play with, the Paddle Tech, the new Paddle Tech, the ALWC, the Bantam ALWC, as well as the GTOC paddles. All those paddles have a 10% discount that applies automatically at checkout if you use our link. So appreciate you doing that if you are purchasing pickleball equipment. All right, let's talk about the riff. So the riff, what I want to touch on in the riff has to do with your journey as a pickleball player. You can use this in life too. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is I play the game suite at the New York Times. I think it's a fun way to start the day. It gets my brain going. I do a few different things, some with numbers, some with shapes, some with letters, right? Because it helps trigger different parts of my brain is the way I look at the world. But in that process, I am subjected, and I know I'm being maybe a little extreme here, but I do feel strongly about this type of stuff. I think it's that important to talk about. But I'm subjected to like conditioning kind of messaging by the game program. Things like, if you solve it in the thing in 2 or something, you get like a message that says, wow, you did impressive. Or if you like take Wordle for a second, if you get to if it takes you 6 tries, it's like literally like few, like PHEW, like whew, wow, whew, you barely made it. If you do multiple days in a row, you get a streak thing, like, oh, you're doing 78-day streak, keep going, that kind of stuff. And I'm all in favor of like accountability type of stuff. And, I know that it has can play a powerful role in, like, let's say you're trying to do like the gym or, so having like being accountable for yourself is good. But I also think that there's you got to live your life kind of a vibe that we need to respect. And so, whenever I see whether it's apps like Duolingo or the New York Times and like that have like these like streak ideas, I think that can create undue pressure on folks. So I think you need to be, aware of that and understand the psychology that they're using, and they're using very powerful psychological tools that are well researched and very effective to get you to behave a certain way. And if you're aware of them, right, and what they're doing, then you can choose to engage with them or choose to disengage your brain from them, more so than if you're not aware of the games that they're playing. I guess pun intended there. But I just think it's important for you to be aware of these types of things as you go through life, because otherwise you end up perhaps subconsciously maybe feeling less than if you finish a Wordle in 6 because of the message you get, or feeling, I would say, not justifiably great if you solve it in 1, for instance, right? To me, solving a Wordle in 1 is pointless because it's just a guess, right? But you get a great, like, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing ever. You solved it in 1, which doesn't make any sense to me to send that message. But, just be aware of that. And, that it extends out to other things like, wins and losses of pickleball and other inputs that you get as a human being. But I just thought it was important to just point that out and just be aware of those types of, the puppies are excited about something, those kinds of inputs that you're going to receive from time to time, whether it's a game app or something else, and be protective of yourself and your journey and your mental health, by not allowing those types of things to have too big of a role in your in how you feel about yourself. So that's this week's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope you get a chance to, if you're into it, to pre-order our book. I think you will enjoy the book a lot. And if you don't enjoy the book, you can always send me an email at tony@betterpickleball.com. Let me know you didn't like the book, and I will make sure that you get your money back for the book, because it's, we do charge for the book because we have expenses to pay, but we're all about delivering, as much value, if not oftentimes a lot more than the dollar amount. So, you can always take a look at the book without feeling there's a risk. I think the price is only like, I don't know, 9 or 10 or 13 or something like that for pre-order. So it's pretty nominal anyway, particularly for what you're getting. But anyway, so take a look at that. I hope you get a chance to check that out. And if you have a minute to rate and review, I really appreciate some of you have rated and reviewed the podcast lately, and really appreciate you doing that. It does make a difference. I like reading them, I'll tell you that much, but it also makes a big difference in terms of other players being able to access the podcast. And lastly, the most direct thing you can do to help somebody else, if you know that they're enjoying pickleball, or maybe not enjoy pickleball so much as they should be, but you think they could enjoy it more by listening to the podcast, share it with your friends, because if you enjoy the podcast, they probably will too. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you during the next episode of Pickleball Therapy. Be well.